I'm joined by Child A in Newsam and Ridgway so-called assurance review. Child A contacted me on Messenger a couple of weeks ago, and, well, her story's horrific. I think I'll let her tell her story herself. Hi, thanks for being very, very, very brave and reaching out. I'm going to just refer to you as Child A throughout all of this, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I've sent you a few questions to look at, and if we can use those questions as a template for our discussion, and you be as comfortable and as free as you want to be. I will try and do as much listening as I can. So if I'm silent for long moments, it's not because I've turned off, it's because I'm listening intently. Is that okay?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, so if you can, will you share what originally happened to you that led to you featuring in this report?
So it started in 2010 when I was having a conversation with someone over MSN, which then turned into like a relationship. I was told he was 50 and wasn't any wiser until weeks later when I'd met him and was made aware he was 19.
How old were you?
I was 14 at this point. At the time, I had a lot going on at home, in school, and it made me feel safe, you know. It gave me attention. It gave me what I thrived at. Well, I felt I thrived at the time. And it continued for several weeks until something had happened in school where I'd been forced to perform oral on a boy who attended the same school during the holidays. Unbeknown to me, a video was made and passed around. The police, social services, who was already part of my case, aware of what was going on, was made aware of this. The boy being 15, maybe 16 at the time, and even with the video evidence, there was no follows up.
Sorry, I'm going to stop you just for clarity purposes. You used the term you were forced to give oral. Yes, so you're forced to perform oral sex on another boy, and that was recorded. Yes?
Yeah.
And that was in school?
No, so this was outside of school.
Okay, during school time, during the school day, journey to school, home, holidays, what?
6-week holidays.
Okay, in the summer holidays.
So the police was aware there wasn't a video. I couldn't tell you if they saw it, although access would be able to be gained as they knew the name of who possessed it and who was passing it around. Nothing was ever done. A conversation between myself and two officers where I was told there was damning evidence to support my claim of it being forceful, as because there was messages sent forward and backwards between me and this guy. Other than that, I never heard anything. I was just left to continue living, going to school every day with this, my attacker, the perpetrator who'd violated me, you know, and I was made to be a liar, you know, and everyone made it clear that's what they thought.
And that was traumatic. That was traumatic. Yeah, that's what you're sharing with me. That was a traumatic experience, yeah? And it knocked you for six. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, because of this, it caused problems at home and it led for me to run away. I was still in contact with this 19-year-old through all this, and it was him who I'd gone to, but was caught and returned home. This increased my belief that, you know, he was the only one there for me. You know, my family was angry because of what had happened, not at me, but the whole situation. And about a week later, I was convinced to walk out of school to meet this 19-year-old, promised a better life, to move away, be happy, you know, something that I think everyone dreams of, even being a little girl. So I walked out of school in the afternoon and went and met. This is where I was then taken behind a mill, told that we had to wait till a certain time, and then raped before being sent home.
By the 19-year-old?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And can I ask you, so, you know, you're clearly a white young woman. What was a 19-year-old? Was he also a white young man?
No, he was Pakistani male.
Okay. So he lured you away on the pretense he was going to take you away to safety.
Yeah.
Raped you in a car and sent you back home.
Yeah, pretty much.
After he'd walked out from school in the afternoon.
Yeah, there was no reports of me leaving school, nothing.
So what did he do next?
I went home, dealt with it myself for a period of time before I attempted an overdose while social services were present. I disclosed what had happened to them, but told, because of the medication I had taken, that I'd need to speak to him, you know, once I'd been to hospital and that.
So you were distressed, you overdosed, social services were present, you disclosed to them what had happened, and they said you'd have to disclose again once you weren't in the condition you were in.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was admitted into hospital, given a mental health work, placed into reflections, Bernardo's, Messenger, you name it, every agency I can think of.
So that's Project Messenger that's repeatedly criticised in the report. This is the award-winning CSC intervention project that now has been ridiculed. It's that one, Messenger, yes?
Yeah, they never, they were only, I used to go on meetings with them individually, and all they were ever bothered about was names, license plate numbers, never what had happened or, you know, ways of preventing this. They just wanted these names and, you know, to write them down to do nothing with, because nothing was ever followed up.
So you gave them names. You gave them names of the 19-year-old, I presume.
Yeah. Yeah.
By this point, I'm presuming you also had his phone number and stuff. You're in regular contact with. So they had the means of contacting this 19-year-old, yes?
Yeah, they were made aware of what they needed to follow up. But nothing, not to my knowledge, nothing was followed up. I weren't made aware of anything being followed up. I don't think it was ever really questioned after my disclosure to the social worker.
So you disclosed you were raped by a 19-year-old man, because that's what a 19-year-old is. I'm sorry. I know you were 13 or 14, but a 19-year-old in that context is a man. He lured you out of school. He raped you. He caused you to overdose. You disclosed that to social services. You disclosed all of the details to Project Messenger. And to the best of your knowledge, nothing ever came of it, and you don't even know if this man was arrested.
So that's correct, yeah. Nothing was done.
And the police, did you speak to the police at any point during this?
So the only dealings I had with the police was when I was reported missing. They used to pick me up and take me home, but they never... So the people I was with were always older, always Asian males. And, you know, they weren't interested in who they were. They were just interested in getting the car and come on.
I'm trying to put some pieces together, so please just bear with me. And I apologise. I understand this will cause you distress. So as a consequence of that first rape with the 19-year-old, you started more and more risk-taking behaviour. And you started hanging around more and more older Asian men. Where did you find these older Asian men? How did you come into contact with them?
So it was the time the social media used. I'd get them adding me and they'd speak to me and, you know, we'd arrange to meet. You know, it was nothing, well, I thought was nothing more than just friends. And then, you know, we'd meet a couple of times and then that's when, like, alcohol had been brought into it and, you know, the constant, oh, we'll bring someone else and introduce her to them. And then they'd manipulate, get me drunk, and then rape me. It was a vicious cycle where I still kept going back, and I thought they were my friends.
And how many times, can I ask you? Roughly.
This continued up until about 2018.
So how many years is that? 4?
Yeah.
And how many men?
I couldn't even contemplate the number.
And the police would regularly find you?
Yeah.
And just take you home and never say a word to the adults they were taking you away from?
Yeah, there was occasions when PNCs were taken of the boys, so they were made aware of the age, and was aware of my age, but, you know, no questions were ever asked.
Okay. And then?
I was then moved to semi-independent living for a short. I lived there for a short period where I was manipulated and used not only by males but by females who I thought were friends. I was intimidated and forced to take Class A drugs, and it was just a downward spiral from there.
Who put you into semi-independent living?
So it originated from my aftercare work, and then through I used to have core meetings on a regular basis, and through all the agencies involved, they'd agreed that I was ready to move on to this semi-independent.
At 17?
Yeah, even though the risk was still high and they were aware of the risk outside and inside whilst I was there.
It says you were in a residential placement in this document in front of me. When were you in this residential placement?
2012 to 2.
Okay, so this was after the 19-year-old, yes?
Yep.
So after the 19-year-old, you're involved in risk-taking behaviour. You're going out and meeting these older Asian men.
Had the older Asian men visiting the property that I was living at as well.
Just let me go back. Just let me set the scene. So you've moved out. Relationship at home has broken down by this point, yes?
Yeah.
And you're put in a residential placement. And you were 14 years old.
No, I was 16 when I was put in residential.
You're put in a residential placement. You were 16 years old. And what happened?
So when I first moved in, the men that I'd been talking to and stuff started relieved. You had to have photo ID to access the premises. They knew and was aware of the age of these men and made the agencies involved of these men coming to visit. But it wasn't until about 2-3 weeks later where a visitor's ban was put in place and a curfew was placed on me.
So men came to visit you with their own IDs, and these were men who you'd known from when you were younger, some of them?
Yeah.
I'm listening to you.
I've lost trail of thought. I apologise.
No, so you don't have to apologise. You're in a residential placement and there were men visiting you.
And then once the visitor ban was put in place, I was going out to visit these people. So I was being reported missing all the time. I was being picked up by police, you know, at ridiculous times in the morning in isolated places with grown men and just taken home, never questioned. You know, some of the vile wordings the police officers used to say, you know, as they were picking us up, and the way they treated me, it was like I wasn't the victim. I was causing it. I was looking for trouble.
You were making these men rape you?
That's the way they made me feel. They made me feel like, you know, they didn't believe me the first time, so my trust in them weren't there. And then the attitude and behaviour around what then continued to happen was as if it was just like trying to sign paperwork off, you know, not doing much looking into the cause or, trying to help.
You were the trouble causer. That's how they saw you.
Yeah, well, that's the way they made me feel. So going to the police, after being not believed the first time with the evidence, who's going to believe someone, who's lied before?
So what happened next? I mean, you're in this residential place. You're in this home for 16 to
So
what?
I've gone to the semi-independent at this point.
So you moved out of that into semi-independence.
Yeah.
Someone decided it was a good idea, despite you absconding at night, despite the police bringing you home. Someone decided that putting you in a semi-independent home was a good idea.
Yeah.
Who was that?
Grooming everyone involved, because the core meeting was like a core meeting happened prior to me moving out, where it wasn't just the housing, it had to be accepted by my social work and other agencies that were involved. So I was in semi-independent for a short time. I'd been intimidated, persuaded to start taking harsher drugs than I was previously. So I started taking Class A. Got addicted very quick, which then led to me being easier to be manipulated to sell my body for money to feed my habit.
So they got you hooked.
Yeah. I moved again, where I was then used by a different group of boys who helped me off the Class A onto alcohol. So I was then being abused and exploited by this group. I think in my head it was better than using Class A. Well, I felt at the time that they were helping me, and then I moved from this semi-independent to another flat, and the police and every agency was aware of the drug and prostitution, and I got a visit of the aftercare worker about a month prior to my birthday to sign me off.
How old were you? Which birthday?
My 18th. So they signed me off, although aware of the dangers and the vulnerability of me still.
So they comprehensively failed you from year 9, 6 weeks holidays, when you were forced to perform oral sex on another boy, and that was recorded. And this spiraled from there all the way up to 18 so far, where aftercare comes along and signs you off their books. So where did you go from that? How have you got your life back together?
I didn't get my life back when I fell pregnant, and it gave me a reason to live. Prior to finding out I was pregnant, I had attempted to commit suicide again because of the ongoing abuse I was suffering. She was a lifeline. She was a second chance. And I honestly don't even want to think where I'd be without my child.
Yeah. I get that. I understand that completely. So you've got your life back together, right? You leave that behind the best you can. What happens next?
I've dealt with, well, I haven't. I've not dealt with what's gone on, but I've managed to push past and try and continue a normal life up until 2 weeks ago, when I was contacted by the police via a phone call.
This is important. So the police contacted you 2 weeks ago. So 2 weeks ago, give or take, is the 7th or 8th of June. Yeah? So the early June, the police contacted you.
Yeah, the 7th of June it was. They asked to have a meeting but was very vague about what it was to do with, as they wanted this meeting to be face-to-face. So I met them later at my property, where I was informed one of the women from the new messenger, it's got a new name now, but they came and told me that the police had been composing this review for many years, and in the midst of them doing this, my case files had been presented where there were multiple failures from various agencies. They then told me that they had used my case files and mimicked them into a short anecdote which was going to be published in the review. During this meeting, my opinion was asked. What I was shown, what was going to be shown in the review. However, since seeing the review, a lot of it has been redacted.
So they showed you things 2 weeks ago that was going into the review, and those things have disappeared, and they've disappeared to one sentence in the review. 5.28, let me read it out to you. Child A was placed in a therapeutic residential placement. Consultant B noted that the plan was appropriate and some progress was made. What did they tell you they were going to put into it?
So I can't remember word for word, but it continued to say about the older men visiting the residential home, me having money, unexplainable, older men. And then they stated I was pregnant twice, which is false. And then right at the end, it said Child A was highly suspected of using Class A and prostitution. That's how they summed it up. Throughout the whole 2 paragraphs, which I was shown, no acceptance, no admission of, failure is in it. It's just stating facts out of my case file, but still portrays, a promiscuous girl who, even after the support they'd put in, I was still deteriorating. It still made me look out to be the bad one.
I think this is where your report on the detailed case studies is. It says confidential report on detailed case studies of 10 children, Appendix G. It says confidential appendices not for publication. So they've held that back. So they've used your case study of describing you a child as a prostitute, is what you just shared with me.
Yeah.
To have that one sentence they've put in there. So it's very ambiguous. Child A was placed in a therapeutic residential placement. Consultant B noted that the plan was appropriate and some progress was being made. Wow. You're not describing any progress being made, are you? Whilst you're in a residential placement that you're absconding from all the time. So you get the messenger lady and someone else come along and say they're going to publish your stuff in this report. Yeah. It's the first you've heard from them in
12 years.
12 years?
12 years, yeah.
It's the first you've heard from them in 12 years. They knock on your door. They left you a letter as well, didn't they? Have you got that letter to hand?
The letter isn't personally written to me. It's been printed out multiple times with our names written on the letterhead.
So it's not even personalised?
No. So the letter says, we are contacting you to let you know there has been a review into the Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police dealt with sexual exploitation of children between 2006 and 2012. The findings of this review are going to be made available on the Greater Manchester Mayor's Office website soon, where it can be seen by members of the public and the media. We are writing to let you know that your name is not in the report, but it does talk about your experience, which you may find distressing. We know some police investigations carried out at the time were not good enough, and we are sorry for any harm you suffered. We are now going to work with Oldham Council to have another look at your case. If we think we can, we will investigate crimes that were committed against you and track down any possible offenders. Police officers would like to speak to you about what happened to you. You can choose when and where you talk to the police officers, and they will do all they can to support you. We know talking about this about what happened in the past may be upsetting. You do not have to do this if you do not want to. We want to do our very best to support you. The people delivering this letter will tell you how you can speak to a specialist detective and access help and support. Right at the end, it says, we know you are likely to have suffered hurt and harm and that this new investigation might be upsetting. We will do everything we can to support you through this difficult time. And it's signed by Chris Bowen, the Chief Superintendent.
So the Chief Superintendent had someone deliver you a generic letter with your name scrawled on top of it, yes?
Yeah.
You had no idea what they were coming for 12 years later. And this report, so you're aware, this report has been 2.5 years, 3 years in the making. They use you as a case study, but they never sought to come and interview you to see what you had to say to them face to face, to actually use real evidence from you rather than the reports they'd written about you. That's what you're getting at, isn't it?
Yeah. Also, during the meeting, there was questions about my well-being, which is something they didn't take the time to look into prior to the meeting. I suffer with really bad mental health, and the outcome from being relayed this news had affected it greatly, but no checks, nothing, was put in place prior to the meeting. They just obtained my information through health, I was told.
So they didn't even have your phone number. They went fishing for your phone number somewhere, which is unlawful, by the way.
The address.
So they went looking for your name and address to come and deliver this letter to you and then buggered off. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
What do you want to happen? How do you feel? Where do you want this to go?
I'm just angry at the moment, and, it's massively affecting my life now. There's many things that, bring back memories, and it's put me back in the mindset of that 14 vulnerable little girl. I feel like I'm being exploited now by the agencies that were there to protect and help me, to try and, justify the past.
You feel that the agencies have only contacted you and are doing this to cover their own backs?
Yeah, there's been no consideration of my well-being. I have a child. The dangers this review could potentially, put me in if my name was to be found, or, if charges are to be brought from my past case. There's nothing. There's no concern. There's nothing there. They're offering a support worker to sit and talk over the phone to, but not actually facing the reality of what the effect this has done to me.
Wow. Andy Burnham, he's the one who commissioned this review. So they've not contacted you until June. You're clearly in this 6 months earlier. He said he was being considerate for victims because this sort of news coming out before Christmas causes harm and alarm. So he is very aware of what's going on, but he sat in that room before December, and you're telling me now you were never contacted until June this year?
No, nothing. I didn't hear anything, which leads me to believe that his statement is a lie. There was no consideration for the victims, as if there was 2 weeks prior notice wouldn't have been given. This isn't something you throw on someone's front doorstep and walk away. This is something that's affected not just my life, but all the other girls' life, and still continues to affect it. And there's been no compassion or nothing from anyone involved who I've come across up to yet.
The people who listen to me don't really understand. They're angry and they have nothing for love for young women like you, but they don't understand how it happened. What happened?
It's difficult to answer, really, because at the time I weren't aware of it. And then to look back and try and find the answers, it's difficult for myself. I can't explain how it happened or why it happened to me. It was just a case of I got myself, well, not myself, but I was in a situation that I couldn't get out of, and I didn't have the agencies there to help and support me out of this.
And when you were out and about, were you on your own? Were you the only girl there, or were there other girls, or were there other teenage girls there as well in these places?
Yeah, there was it differed depending on who I was with, but yeah, there could be other girls who was present, but it was quite often where they wouldn't bring other girls. They kept us away from each other. They kept us segregated so that when we did eventually meet and was like, oh, we were, putting pieces together.
So it was planned. What they did was planned, and you were part of a network. You're describing something to me where you were trapped. You're a child who's trapped. Will you talk to the police?
I don't feel that talking to the police will progress anything. I just feel it's going to drag up memories and potentially put myself in danger. These abusers might have done it to many girls, but, if they were to figure out my identity, I don't feel the police are able to protect me and keep me safe.
And you've got a child. You're now no longer just thinking for yourself, are you?
No, it's, I'm a single mom, literally living in the middle of it still.
When I first spoke to you, I said this is what the Maggie Oliver Foundation was specifically set up for. Have you managed to contact them?
So I have messaged her when I first found out about the review and my files being used, and I've recently messaged her since the review. Have not heard anything.
I'll call them in the morning. So the first thing I'll do tomorrow is I will call them and ask them. Did you email them?
Messaged them, the foundation Facebook page.
Okay, I'll contact them for you. And you contacted me because you want me to share this, don't you? This isn't me nudging you or I've not come and found you. You've sought me out and you want this story shared.
Yeah.
And what do you hope will come as a consequence of me sharing this?
I'd like the police to admit the failings, but even if not, to realise and put in place better procedures to safeguard, these young girls who could potentially be at risk. They're focusing a lot on what happened, but what's still happening in Oldham?
Do you feel young women are still at risk in Oldham? What happened to you? Do you feel that's still happening in Oldham?
Yes, greatly. Younger girls, older boys, it's people don't even look twice nowadays, and I just feel that the police need to focus on. I can't get my teenager life back. I never had a normal teenager, but these girls can, and it can be prevented. And I just feel the police need to, take a step back and realise that trying to cover up their failings from the past could potentially be harming the future or the present cases that they're dealing with now.
I think you're a very brave young woman. You've got my phone number, you know where I am, and thank you for your time.
If it wasn't for me having a friend who was aware of you and your work and Maggie Oliver, I probably wouldn't have done nothing. Because when you need help, go to the police. And who can you go to when the police ain't an option?
You need to do one thing for me, if that's okay. For yourself, more than for me. What they've written about you and used about you is not in the public domain, but they've shared it with other people because it's a confidential appendix. So you need to get in touch with them and say you want a copy of that because you're entitled to a copy of what they've used.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll message you exactly what to say. You get yourself a copy of that because, it's not right. Thanks for your time. You know where I am. And if you ever want a cup of tea or anything, just give me a call. You're a brave young woman. You're an extremely brave young woman. And I'm deeply sorry. I'm sorry for what's happened to you. It's wrong. It's just wrong, and the way the authorities failed you is just horrific. When you're a child, it's the duty of adults, particularly who work in those services, to take care of you and treat you as a child, not to treat you how you were treated. It's just wrong.
Yeah.
Thank you. You get on with your evening. Thank you very, very much.
All right.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.